So today we're going to be talking about overtime pay, and we'll just go ahead and get into it. So overtime pay is just when you work more than your regular hours, and most of the time overtime pay is either time and a half or double time. So that just means you're getting time and a half. Basically, this is a good way to look at it. You're getting 1.5 times what your hourly rate usually is. So that's your overtime pay is always usually more than your regular hourly pay. So, and for double time, it's just 2 times. So, time and a half is just 1.5 times your regular pay, and double time is just 2.5 times your regular pay. And when we calculate overtime pay, this is the formula we use. So to get overtime pay, so this is OP is what we're going to use for overtime pay. OR is going to be our overtime rate. And then OW is going to be the overtime hours that we worked. So that's how you find overtime pay. And then to find the total that you end up being paid, you're going to take your straight time pay and you're just going to add that with your overtime pay. So you're just going to add those two together. So I'm going to do an example of that. I'm going to probably do 2 examples. And this first one's going to be a tad bit easier. So it says Alan is paid 100 or 800 or 820 an hour. So that's going to be his regular pay. And he works a 40-hour week. And then it says his overtime rate is 1.5 times his regular pay. So his overtime rate is 1.5. So that would be our OR. And it says this week he worked 40 hours plus 10 hours of overtime. So what's his total pay? So we're looking for the total. So we want total equals STP plus OP. So we want the straight time pay plus the overtime pay. And the steps to doing this is to just figure out what this is, figure out what this is, and then we'll just add them together. So we'll start off with our straight time pay. All right, so straight time pay is going to equal our, that's going to be our hourly rate. So that's HR times, that's our hours worked. So HW. So STP is going to equal, all right, so that would be 820 times 40. So $8.20 times 40, which will give us, I think it should give us 328. Let's make sure. 820 times 40. Yep. So our straight time pay is $328. Now we're going to look for our overtime pay. All right, so OP is going to equal OR times OW. So that'll look something like this. So we'll take our overtime rate times the hours we worked. Now to find overtime rate, you're going to have to multiply. So to find this, we're going to have to multiply that by our regular pay. So since we earn time and a half, we'll make 1.5 times our regular pay. And then we'll multiply that by the number of overtime hours that we worked. So that's what that is. So that'll be 10. So when you're figuring out overtime rate, you're going to you're going to multiply, if it's time and a half, you're going to multiply 1.5 by your regular amount that you make per hour. And if it's double time, you'll just do 2 times that. So let's see, that'll give us 1.5 times 8.2. So that'll mean we get 12. That's our overtime rate, will be 12.30. And we're going to take that, multiply it by 10. So that'll give us 12 times 30. So it should be 123. 123. So this is our overtime pay. This is our straight, the 328 is our straight time pay. So we just take those two, add them together. So we're going to add, so our total is going to equal 328 plus 123. That'll give us 451 total. So the big thing to make sure you do is this. Big thing you make sure you do is this. Make sure you multiply. So if it's time and a half, you're going to multiply 1.5 times your regular pay times that 820. And if it's double time, you just do 2 times that. That's the biggest part of figuring out your overtime pay. All right, let's look at another example. So in this example, you're going to be presented with 2 scenarios. One's going to be to find the overtime pay, or you find your total, and then another one's going to be to find what how many hours of overtime you work. So they'll give you a total, and you'll have to figure out what the overtime is, or the overtime hours are. So it says Jessica's paid $12.50 an hour. So that's our regular pay rate. And then it's a 40-hour work week. Her overtime pay is time and a half, or 1.5 times. Yes, so that's time and a half. And if she earned this much, how many hours of overtime did she work? So here's what we're going to have to do to figure this out. So we're going to have to take our total pay. So our total equals STP, which is our straight time pay. And that's plus OP, which is our overtime pay. Now, when it asks you for the overtime hours, you're going to really focus on this. That's how you're going to be able to solve this. But first, we've got to do the first part of this. So we know that our total $612.50 equals. Now, if we figure out our straight time pay, we can sub that in. So let's figure out what that is. So we're just going to take our hourly rate times 40. And that will give us $12.50 times 40. It's going to be 500. So we can go ahead and sub that in. So equals 500. Plus, now we don't know what our overtime pay is because we need to look for what our overtime hours are. So you're going to have to set this up a little bit differently. So you're going to have to come over here and say overtime pay equals our overtime rate, which if it's 1.5 times, we're going to take 1.5 times, I'll use the X since we're using some decimals, times 12.5, $12.50. And then that'll be times our overtime hours worked. But that we don't know. So we don't know that part. So now our rate would be 1.5 times 12.50. So that's going to equal 1875. That's our rate. And that's going to be multiplied by our overtime hours worked, but we don't know that. So now we're going to take that and sub it back into our original formula. So we're going to take that, sub it back in here. So that'd be $18.75 OW. Now we're going to have to manipulate this fraction to figure, or this equation to figure this out. So we're going to have to solve for this. That's how you complete this, or that's how you'd end up solving this. So the first thing we need to do is subtract by 500 on both sides. So it's just like we did in Algebra 1, Algebra 2. This is just solving equations. So then this will leave me with $112.50 equal to $18.75 OW. And then to get rid of this $18.75, we're just going to divide by it. So then we're going to take 112.5 divided by 1875, and that'll give us our final answer. So OW equals 6, and that's what we wanted to look for. So these are going to be the only two situations you get. Either you have to find the total, or you'll have to find the hours worked, overtime hours worked, and that's how you would do it. And we'll go over this a little bit more. We'll do some more examples of this. But that will be all for this video.